RNZ News at 3 o'clock. Kia ora, good afternoon, I'm Sarah Bradley. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is about to hold a media conference on New Zealand's response to Tonga's volcanic eruption. We'll cross there as soon as it gets underway. Reports are starting to trickle in from Tongan families who are reconnecting with loved ones in parts of Tonga, including the capital Nuku'alofa. Phone lines and internet remain down for much of the country, but people are beginning to share information on social media after speaking to loved ones. There are unconfirmed reports that the tsunami advisory in Tonga is still active and that Tonga's Prime Minister has authorised bakeries, petrol stations and shops to provide necessities. There have been no official reports of casualties in Tonga, and Save the Children has reported one person is missing in Nuku'alofa. There are reports that the villages of Sopu, Kolomotua, Kolofo'au, Ma'ufanga, Patangata have been affected by the tsunami, especially areas near Vuna Road. Unofficial reports that the villages of Whanga and Havelu are less affected than other areas have also been reported. The ACT Party says it is unacceptable that no tsunami alerts were issued for Northland residents after the Tonga eruption. Civil Defence spokesperson James McDowell says neither the emergency mobile alert system nor any tsunami sirens were activated before strong wave surges destroyed dozens of boats in the Tutukaka Marina and flooded a campground. Mr McDowell says locals have received mobile and siren alerts in the past over lesser events. He says there needs to be an investigation into why an alert wasn't issued in Northland. An MIQ worker in Auckland has tested positive for Omicron. The Ministry of Health announced a staffer who tested positive yesterday has been infected since the 10th of January. Our reporter Kirsty Frame has more.
More than 50 close contacts have so far been identified following just one case of Omicron, with 7 locations of interest. The border worker returned a positive test result after routine testing. Between infection and testing, the case took 2 bus services in Auckland, visited a supermarket and 4 other stores across the city. Those locations have been listed on the Ministry's website, and some require visitors to immediately isolate. The Ministry of Health says anyone in Auckland with symptoms should get tested. All of the cases' 7 household contacts have since returned a negative test result. 15 of the cases' 48 close contacts have returned a negative test, including 5 in Taupo.
A lawyer for Australia's immigration minister has told judges that the tennis star Novak Djokovic could simply have had himself vaccinated. The Serbian is appealing against Friday's cancellation of his visa on health and good order grounds. The minister's lawyer says that Djokovic's views on vaccination are illustrated by the fact he is still unvaccinated, months after jabs became available. Stephen Lloyd also says the minister considered a BBC report that anti-vaccine groups have treated Djokovic as a hero or an icon of free choice. Djokovic's lawyer argues there is no evidence the player's presence would foster anti-vaccine sentiment in Australia. That's the news. Now to the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, mainly fine, the chance of a shower in the east this afternoon. Waikato to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, fine. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, often cloudy, a few showers turning to rain for a time north of Napier. Southerly gales for Gisborne tomorrow. For Wairarapa, cloudy periods and a few showers, mainly along the coast. Marlborough, Canterbury, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Fine apart from the odd shower about the ranges during the afternoons and evenings. And some low cloud tomorrow morning. For Fiordland, fine at first. Cloud develop.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm joined today by Minister of Defence Penny Henare and Minister for Pacific Peoples and Associate Minister of Foreign Affairs Opito William Seo. Yesterday evening, a significant eruption occurred from the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai underwater volcano, located about 30 kilometres southeast of Fonuafo'au Island in Tonga. I know many of you will have seen the footage and found it deeply concerning. Since then, the New Zealand government has been urgently attempting to gather information about the situation on the ground in Tonga and the Pacific, as well as issuing local warnings relating to strong waves and surges on the New Zealand coastline. As yet, there are no official reports of injuries or deaths in Tonga. In addition, all High Commission staff are safe and well, as are NZDF and police staff stationed in Tonga. There are currently 30 New Zealanders registered on safe travel as being in Tonga, but obviously the number of family and friends with New Zealand connections will be significantly higher. Communication with Tonga remains very limited, and I know that is causing a huge amount of anxiety for the Tongan community here who are trying to get hold of loved ones back home. The main undersea communications cable has been impacted, likely due to the loss of power, and that is why communications have been limited. Telecommunication authorities are working urgently to restore communication. Official damage assessments are not yet available. However, our High Commission in Tonga advised the tsunami has had a significant impact on the foreshore on the northern side of Nuku'alofa, with boats and large boulders washed ashore. Shops along the coast have been damaged and a significant cleanup will be needed. Nuku'alofa is covered in thick film of volcanic dust, but otherwise conditions are calm and stable. Power has been restored to some of Nuku'alofa, and local mobile phones, we're advised, are working. However, I would note that we've not yet received news from other coastal areas of Tongatapu or the outer islands yet. In keeping with local advice, if you or a loved one are in the affected area, follow the advice of the local authorities, including any tsunami evacuation orders. Please also keep family back in New Zealand informed of your well-being if you can. We also recommend that you stay informed of developments by monitoring local media. Although there is currently no ongoing large eruption, further activity cannot be ruled out at this stage. The Tonga Met Office has confirmed that ash has stopped falling in Nuku'alofa. The Government of Tonga has accepted an initial offer of assistance from New Zealand of an NZDF surveillance flight. A New Zealand Defence Force P3 Orion is ready to deploy tomorrow morning, subject to conditions including ashfall. At present, it is not safe or viable to begin this reconnaissance. This morning, the top of the ash clouds were estimated to be 63,000 feet, higher than an RNZ aircraft can fly. Officials are in contact with Tongan authorities on priorities for further aid. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and NZDF and other New Zealand agencies are working through further air and sea options to get aid to Tonga. The government has also approved an initial $500,000 to be able to respond to requests for assistance from Tongan authorities. This would include costs of relief supplies and technical support, as well as supporting local responses. Please let me be very clear, this is very much a starting figure and the government will provide additional assistance as required. I've been in contact with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison today, and New Zealand and Australia stand at the ready to assist our Pacific neighbours. And as I've just advised, we have the aircraft ready to deploy and in tandem are also looking at the deployment of a Navy vessel, should it be required, with additional provisions. Very much at the moment, though, we wait for word from Tongan authorities around what is required in Tonga to support the relief efforts. As you can see, I have both Minister Henare and Seo here to assist with the response to any questions, which we're happy to now take.
RNZ Pacific's Lydia Lewis, have you spoken with the new Prime Minister of Tonga or any other government officials?
No, not at this stage. Our officials have been working very hard to establish direct communication, and like many of our cabinet team, there will be some of us who will know of people or will have second-hand information being fed through to us or feedback directly from our officials in our High Commission. But otherwise, it has not been straightforward to establish communications. that it's to a certain degree slowing down our assessment of the support that Tonga may require from us. In lieu of that information, though, we are preparing our Defence Force assets to support any relief effort that may be required. I'll certainly look to make contact in the future with my counterpart in Tonga, but at the moment, obviously, I imagine they'll be very focused on the situation at hand.
You did mention that our phone lines are intermittently back up.
Yeah.
What was the last contact you had from Tonga?
At the moment, we're mostly receiving our information via our High Commission. Perhaps the Minister may be aware of when that last contact was made. You'll see that from the readout, we've supplied the information we have from our officials on the ground. Unfortunately, on the outer islands, we as yet don't have a lot of information, and as you've heard me say, we don't have a lot of information on all coastal areas generally. The communication challenges, the undersea cable that I mentioned, there has been a view that because power was cut because of the tsunami, that has affected the operation of the cable. So there is currently a preliminary view that can be re-established.
Will New Zealand assist with the re-establishment of that communication line?
Absolutely. Anything that may be required that Tonga seeks from us in terms of assistance, we are ready to provide as required. But at the moment, very much working to establish what's needed. A clear indication that has come from Tonga is the need for water. The ash cloud has, as you can imagine, caused contamination. That's on top of already a challenging environment in terms of water supply, and so that's what the Defence Force are very focused on.
Yes.
Sorry, Minister, you might have something further on communication.
You'll appreciate that this took place yesterday, and it continues to be, we continue to maintain to see what happens to it. Linkages with our New Zealand High Commissioner in Tonga continues to today. The closest link with the Tongan government is the Consul General here, Mr. Aho, and so we've reached out to him to see whether the royal family are okay, because there were some rumours about them being off island. He's responded that they are fine and well. And so we'll maintain that link with the Consul General as well as the official level. We'll continue talking to our New Zealand High Commissioner on the ground.
I just have one question on the royal family for you. There are reports that the King of Tonga is on the island of Ewa while the Queen and the Princess are at the official residence in Nuku'alofa. Any update? Have you had any contact?
Other than what the Consul General has said, that the royal family are well and fine.
Prime Minister, Tonga is a collection of low-lying islands. The volcano has a lot of acid in seawater, people breathing in a lot of ash. Volcanoes can be unpredictable. It's good that it's ebbed a bit. And it's good also that you've spoken to Scott Morrison. I'm sure you've probably kick-started discussions with your other bilateral partners. Should the need arise, is New Zealand able to repatriate some of the Tongans that will be affected the most?
At the moment, all I can say is we stand ready to assist. We really don't have much information at all around what has the impact of the volcano on those low-lying areas and islands. And I think that's one of the reasons that for Tonga, and certainly the support that we're looking to provide is around that reconnaissance flight to be able to establish the impact on a wider area. That's something we're hoping will be able to be undertaken tomorrow. At the moment, it is unfortunately not a safe or stable environment for aircraft to be in. If it unfolds that tomorrow is again not a safe or stable environment, we do have in tandem our Navy working and preparing to also deploy into the region, but it's a matter of making sure that we have available on those vessels exactly the needs that are required on the ground. We know water's one. We're seeking more information on what in addition will be required. Some of our Navy vessels can deploy within a period of 8 hours. It's just a matter of making sure that on board they have what is required. I might have Minister Henare just say a little bit more about the reconnaissance mission though, and perhaps the C-130, which I haven't spoken to.
Kia ora, thank you, Prime Minister. Yes, the New Zealand Defence Force stand ready and able to respond. Reconnaissance, as you can already tell, is really important to make sure we are able to assist effectively, but also that we are safe going into those spaces. We are talking right now, of course, about above water. What we don't know is what's happened under the water. We do have a hydrographic vessel that may be able to assist there, but we need to make sure that that environment is safe for us to enter into. We'll continue to stay in close communications with our defence attaches who are based in Tonga, as well as the Australian defence attaches who are giving us really good information at the moment. But I can say right now, our people are ready to deploy. We just need to make sure they're kitted out with exactly what the Tongan people need, and we'll be able to support as much as we can.
A lack of water is pretty dire. At what stage do you just go?
Oh, look, I think we'll all acknowledge, and it's an ongoing challenge there. We just want to make sure that we can respond effectively. If we're going to deploy a vessel, we need to make sure it's got all the stocks that that are needed. And of course, as you have addressed, water is one of those critical things. What we want to do, and the Prime Minister might want to speak to this, is to make sure that because of COVID-19, we can continue to keep the people of Tonga safe while also deploying our people to support.
Minister, you might want to speak to the C-130, which is available to deploy as soon as it's safe to do so.
So the C-130 is, of course, our Hercules, which when we can assess whether or not it can land in Nuku'alofa, or we'll have to make other arrangements to make sure we can deliver goods. Reconnaissance is the first key step to that, but of course, as the Prime Minister has already indicated, we've got to make sure that the atmospheric conditions are available, or under the right conditions, to make sure that our flights are available and we can get in there. Just finally, on that, some of the other options that we've looked towards exploring is how do we at least get to the front line, if you like, instead of deploying from New Zealand, which is, of course, where our assets are, how we might look to use some of the other places like Niue to support our actions.
Just to be really clear, I mean, the clear view of ministers and officials is we want to be in Tonga and on the ground as soon as we're possibly able to. And so for the flights, it is looking like tomorrow, we hope. In the meantime, we are already preparing our Navy vessels. It's a matter of establishing which vessel will be most appropriate to go in, whether or not it's the Manawanui in order to undertake that surveillance underwater, or whether or not it's the likes of the Canterbury because we need that desalination equipment available. Either way, we are already preparing to deploy.
Prime Minister, either way you need people on the ground, as has been said. Why not just deploy a ship? I understand the risks around air travel. Why not get a ship on the way as soon as possible?
As I say, we are preparing for those ships to travel as we speak.
What COVID protocols are you going to need to follow with any assistance that New Zealand provides? And how is any kind of rescue mission complicated by the current COVID situation?
All of our New Zealand Defence Force staff are fully vaccinated, and the reason for that is to make sure that they are able to deploy safely at a moment's notice. We will be working with officials on the ground in Tonga to make sure that we meet any expectations and protocols that they have established. Obviously, New Zealand's strong current position will serve us well and be able to give confidence to the people of Tonga that we will make sure that our people are as safe as possible coming into an environment that is COVID-free.
What support is Australia going to provide? Obviously, we're prepping to go into Tonga. What about the US as well? China, Japan? Have you spoken to
No,
officials?
not as yet. I know that there's been conversations going on between the likes of Fiji, Australia and New Zealand. We will make sure that as soon as we know that our flights are able to be undertaken, that we'll be staying in touch with particularly Australia and Fiji. And so those are conversations that are ongoing. Very, very much though, of course, we've said that we're very keen to get there as soon as we can.
And other places in the Pacific as well, obviously Fiji impacted. Can you please list the other places that you have been in contact with?
Yeah, at the moment, of course, the focus has very much been on Tonga. We know that that's where we've seen that direct impact. We've certainly seen the reporting around preparation for potential tsunami events, but it does look, of course, like the most heavily impacted, particularly because of the ash loading, has been Tonga and the proximity. As yet, no other reports that would suggest additional outside assistance is required.
How many personnel is there a possibility of sending if we take some of these measures that you've outlined?
I have the Minister speak to what it would take to support the P3, the C-130. Of course, it will vary for something like the Manawanui or the Canterbury. But as I say, the Canterbury is ready and able to be deployed in as little as 8 hours, and it's very much around making sure that we always have Defence Force staff who are able to deploy quickly. And so NZDF already underway on establishing and preparing for that. Minister?
Yes, if I can, it's predominantly logistics teams, engineers and medics. That's generally what we deploy in the first instance, in particular on naval ships. I just want to touch on another comment made about COVID-19. We've done a number of operations in the Pacific over the past 2 years which have been contactless, and the way we work with Pacific islands to make sure that we continue to keep them safe. So with all of those in mind, of course on the ship I've spoken about who we'd look to deploy on a ship, but of course the planes are something different. But of course that's exactly what we need to find out, what's needed, and we can make sure that we've got the right teams to support that.
Will meteorologists and geologists also be deployed from New Zealand as well among those medics?
Look, I suspect that the need for them to be a part of this particular deployment is important. As the Prime Minister's already said, one of our ships has the ability to do hydrographic surveillance amongst other things, and I think in order for us to make sure that we can continue to supporting it, we will need that particular expertise.
Prime Minister, do you fear that once communications are re-established that we will see injuries and deaths reported?
Well, look, of course, there have been reports that are coming through those less formal channels. For those organisations that may have satellite communications, the strongest feedback at the moment is just the impact that the ash is having on Tonga, and so that's what initial reports seem to be suggesting. But at this stage, it would just be too early, particularly when there are parts of Tonga where we just don't know yet. We just haven't established communication. And this is where there's, of course, an urgency here. We want to make sure that we're there on the ground as soon as possible. But for our Navy vessels, it will take several days to reach Tonga. We need to finally balance the need to get there quickly, but to make sure we also get the people and resources they need there as well. And in some cases, we have parts of Tonga we've just not even been able to establish communication.
Can you talk us through some of the early stages of after you'd seen the pictures, and talk us through how that came across your desk?
Well, of course, I saw the immediate reporting, and then for us it was a matter of both establishing what the impact might be on coastal areas here in New Zealand. So immediately our Minister for Civil Defence kicks into gear. We already have established communication channels where all ministers who are required are communicated with all at once. That was the first stage for us, and then of course making contact with our Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defence to make sure that we also had planning and preparation underway to support Tonga if required.
What did you make of some of the footage that you've seen?
Do you know, for many of us, and particularly because we haven't seen this kind of level of volcanic activity for a number of years, and being able to see those satellite images, I just think brought home to everybody just the scale and the violence of that eruption. And so then knowing the proximity of Tonga to that eruption, but also the fact that it was heard so widely in the region, I think immediately caused everyone to be very concerned for friends and family, and that is why, of course, everyone is working as quickly as they can.
Just on friends and family, a lot of New Zealanders will have friends and family over there, and the lack of communication would just be horrible.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for them, and do any of you three have friends and family over there you're waiting to hear from?
I have family who have ties and links and who work across the region and have had satellite communication, and so that's where I've heard some of that emerging information alongside what we were hearing from the High Commission. But again, that coupled with the footage, I think, just seeing some of those waves come in and peeling back fence lines and structures, you can see the force of those surges. I think everyone just wants to establish how wide scale that impact has been. As I say, there are just parts we haven't made contact with yet, which is very worrying.
Can you name those parts?
Name those.
The parts where we haven't had contact with yet?
At the moment, as I've said, we've mostly got reporting from Nuku'alofa, and then beyond that, we're still waiting.
I mean, yes, we've got MPs who have linkages back to Tonga, and they've got family there, very worried. But the Pacific and Tonga are part of our whānau. And so there's been overwhelming concern from the diaspora here, as well as our many genealogical links and families. And my message has been last night just to be patient and remain calm. It's just too early. You've got to allow the government officials to do the work that they've got to be able to do to identify how extensive the harm is, and for our officials here to be able to then determine. Water, absolutely. Pacific peoples, we're a resilient group of people, but we've also experienced tsunamis, hurricane storms, and so we know what's needed at the very beginning. But I have asked people just to be patient. Overwhelming offers of support from academics, engineers, local groups and businesses who have links back to Tonga. So we've just got to allow time for the officials to do their work. And then, of course, we've got to figure out how do we channel the support that's been on offer in a way that we're not also putting pressure on the officials on Tonga when they've got to look out for the damage and figure out how to support the local people there.
Minister, you may have also informally been advised, of course, that as you would expect with a tsunami event, that people have reactively moved inland, that with schools currently out, those facilities, church facilities, are being utilised locally, and that is as you would expect, that as a precautionary act that people are currently inland.
That's right. There's been a lot of offer of support from people, but what we've also got to be mindful of, we're operating in a COVID environment, and we need to be protective of the Tongan community there. It's impacted right across the region. Last night, the Cook Islands saw a swell, Vanuatu saw a swell. This morning, I was pleased to see that Tokelau, Samoa, all of them have reduced their alert level for tsunami warning. So it's good signs so far, but it's just too early to really assess how far and how deep the damage is.
And just on other places, here in Northland, there's been some pretty bad damage. What would you say to them?
Yeah.
There's been enough alerts going out. Some people have been a bit concerned.
Yeah. Look, there was obviously the statements made by our National Emergency Management team to just be aware, stay away from those coastal areas, expect that it would be likely that we would see unusual behaviour, surges, and that for a period of time it would be better to be away from those coastlines. There have been, of course, some precautionary acts as well for certain areas, particularly where there were camping involved. But, of course, in an unpredictable environment, we'd much prefer to take that precautionary approach. And although we know that it's of course interesting to people, we want them to be careful and stay away. Okay.
Are you or other ministers planning to meet with members of the Tongan community in the meantime?
Well, obviously, we have a number of members of Parliament who are members of the Tongan community, and so as part of their work will be in very close contact with the community. I imagine we'll be also picking up pieces of information as much as they're able to, with channels of communication being so affected. But as I say, we've established also that contact with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs employees on the ground, which is helping to support our work. And the best thing we can do is also get that Defence Force flight up. As I said, it was initially thought that the undersea cable may have been damaged by the eruption. The suggestion now seems to be that it was actually power related, and because power is able to be restored, there is a hope that communication will be restored soon too.
Are we expecting any more further swells or anything bigger happening here in New Zealand, mainly Northland?
Yeah, what I might do is put out the latest reporting from NEMA. They are constantly assessing the information that they have. So I'd just like to check whether or not there's been anything since I last looked about an hour ago, and we can make sure that we provide that to you.
Just two more questions from me. So Kina Hinare said that the deployment can happen within 8 hours.
Yep.
Is that likely to be deployed, before midnight tonight?
No, so we're able to deploy within 8 hours, but what we do need to establish from Tongan authorities what are the supplies that they need to ensure that we have available and are supplying on the ground. So we're ready, we are doing the work required to deploy with urgency, but we're also seeking from the Tongan authorities what it is they need to we need to make sure that we are providing.
And any advice to holidaymakers in the Cook Islands? Do you have any concern for them to come home?
I would just say to anyone in the region, of course, just seek local information, and please adhere to the local advice. Yeah.
Just a couple of questions on the COVID situation in New Zealand.
Sure.
In light of the news that the infected MIQ worker had Omicron, are there any plans to put in place additional measures? No,
not at this stage. You will have seen from the release from the Ministry of Health that this individual who has done everything by the book and has been operating in a very cautious way was picked up in routine surveillance testing. They have had a number of household contacts, all of whom have returned negative tests. They have some wider contacts that have also returned negative tests. There are some remaining contacts from bus journeys where Auckland Transport and the Public Health Unit are currently seeking tests from and making contact with as we speak. At this stage, however, it looks like it has been found relatively early. We have a good list of those that we are seeking, and at this stage, looking like our contact tracing is able to do the work for us.
And when can we expect the next update on the marketplace system?
So, of course, we said that we would be seeking advice from the Ministry of Health this week around the next steps for New Zealand. I think probably what everyone would be aware, though, is that the environment that we're operating in internationally at the moment is one of caution. What the most recent Omicron case in a MIF worker demonstrates is that our systems are playing a very important role in working to try and hold Omicron at our border. But it is sadly a case of when, not if. That is why we are asking everyone who is eligible, please, make sure you're up to date with your vaccinations. We've brought forward boosters because we know it has an impact in protecting people from severe illness with Omicron. So please, if you're eligible, go out and get your booster and help us prepare.
Before Christmas, the 17th of January was given as the date.
Yep, the week of. So we will be receiving advice this week. But what I'm anticipating is that we'll have a cautious approach from the Ministry of Health, given the environment that we see globally with Omicron, how transmissible it is, and that we continue to work very hard to keep it at our border. But we're routinely now seeing more cases at the border than we are of Delta in the community. I think it just demonstrates how rife it is globally, and the fact that at some point we do expect that Omicron will reach beyond our border, and we need to make sure we are prepared.
Just in the light of when, not if, there is an Omicron outbreak, would that affect AE deployments to Tonga in the future to help?
We're, of course, already making use of the New Zealand Defence Force and OPROTEC, the work that they're doing in our managed isolation facilities. So obviously they are already playing a support role, but they have also ensured that they have available staff to ensure that we can also support the region, particularly when it is a period of time where we have cyclones. Anything else? Yeah, please, and we'll finish on you.
Would you review the quarantine-free travel arrangements with the islands in light of the volcanic incidents in Tonga?
Well, obviously we do have arrangements currently available. Actually, the major issue that we've had to navigate for those quarantine-free arrangements, where of course often it's New Zealand has been very open to having quarantine-free travel in from parts of the Pacific where there is no COVID. The limitation has been ensuring that those citizens can then return home. And because of the quarantine arrangements that many of our Pacific Island neighbours are using to protect themselves and their people, it does limit the number of people who are able to go back. And so that's been of concern. We've wanted to consider that with those quarantine-free arrangements because we don't wish for people to be stranded. We know what distress that causes when they can't get home. So that's probably, in recent times, been one of the greater deciding factors for us. Okay, last one?
Tomorrow, children
yes.
They can start getting under getting vaccinations. Are we ready for that? And any advice to parents who are a bit uncertain?
Yes, we are. We are ready for that rollout. Obviously, we've been preparing for some time, and that will be available from tomorrow. For any parent considering that decision, the one thing I would say is we wouldn't make a recommendation that we wouldn't undertake ourselves. but it is always a parent's choice. So a parent in making that choice, if they wish to seek information, please speak to your GP if you have questions. Maybe seek out the advice of some of those New Zealand paediatricians who have put information and made it available online. Seek the advice of health professionals, but please know we would not have made a decision with this rollout were we not confident and were we not willing to make sure it was available for our own family and our own children. Okay, thank you everyone. Maybe I'll see some of you tomorrow for my booster.